Okay, today I'm going to talk about John Locke. So 1632 to 1704. 1632, 1704. Last time I talked about Descartes, and I'll still say more about Descartes, but this one I just want to talk about. I'm just going to talk about Locke. Descartes is a rationalist. He's the father of modern philosophy, but he's also the first modern rationalist. So rationalism, Descartes is the father of modern rationalism. That's the idea that we can learn important things about reality independent of sense perception, simply relying on reason alone. That should remind you of Plato, because Plato is really a rationalist. But Plato is a couple thousand years, about 2,000 years before Descartes. So Plato really is he's the father of really the father of rationalism, but Descartes is the father of modern rationalism. And John Locke is an empiricist, so he's the father of modern empiricism. And modern empiricism is a view that all knowledge begins with sense experience, and that's what Aristotle said. So you can see Aristotle as the grandfather of modern empiricism, and Plato as, say, the grandfather of modern rationalism. Okay, so Locke is an empiricist, meaning that all knowledge begins with sense experience. So basically, he was very. I'll tell you what happened. One time he was sitting around with some friends, and they were discussing metaphysical issues. They were talking about the ideas of Spinoza, Leibniz, Descartes. These are all rationalists, and they all disagreed. And Locke said, we should stop discussing all these metaphysical issues because, first of all, we should find out what the mind is capable of knowing. Maybe it's going to turn out that the human mind is incapable of solving these problems. And so maybe we're wasting our time. So what Locke wanted to do was to determine the limits of human knowledge. Actually, he's the first person to do that. So, and ever since John Locke, that's been a major interest of philosophy to figure out what the mind is capable of knowing. Are there limits to it? Or, as some people believe, some people still do believe it, that the human mind is capable of knowing everything. John Locke didn't believe that. Locke believed that knowledge is limited to what can be based upon experience. Locke did agree with Descartes that the world is split up into minds and bodies. But normally people don't talk about Lockean dualism. They talk about Cartesian dualism, because Descartes is really the beginner of this idea. But Locke did accept the view of Descartes that reality can be broken into minds and bodies, but he developed it differently, very differently. And you'll see in a second why that is the case. Let me go over. I want to go over today. I want to go over Locke's view of substance. What a substance is. Going back to Aristotle, substance is that which does not depend upon anything else. So, for example, Aristotle would say the horse is a substance. The color of the horse is not a substance because it depends upon the horse. It has to be in the horse. The size of the horse is not a substance because it has to be the size of something. The color has to be the color of something. The weight has to be the weight of something. The age has to be the age of something, and so on. So the something that is being described for Aristotle is the substance. Descartes is a little more radical than Spinoza, than Aristotle, and I'll explain that later. But he does agree with Aristotle that a substance is what really exists. Okay, a substance is something that really does exist, independently of anything else. Now I want to talk about Locke, because Locke also believed that substances exist. So I'm going to give you an example. I'll take a substance, an apple, for example. So here's Locke's how Locke would analyze what's going on when here's somebody looking at an apple, right? This is their eye. What happens? Here's an apple. You could be anything. It could be a horse, anything else. I'll use an apple. What happens is this is a substance. It's something that exists in the world, something that we can see. It's an object of perception. This is supposed to be an eye. So light waves from the apple impinge on the retina. That sets up a series of electrochemical impulses and so on in the brain. And, it's very complicated. I mean, I'm not an expert in this, but the people that study it, they can draw very complicated diagrams. Exactly what happens in the brain is very, very complicated. But eventually what happens is that there is a perception. The brain actually perceives redness. It perceives shape. It actually perceives an image. Now, I'll tell you what, no matter how complicated, these neurosurgeons who study the brain, no matter how complicated a design they do, they can show you all the neuronal pathways and so on eventually eventuates in perception, but no one has a clue as to how all these neuronal networks in the brain actually can lead to a perception. No one has a clue about that. It's a complete mystery. They can tell you what leads to it, but not how it happens. And that's really the fundamental basis of the mind-body problem. How does the body, the matter, how does it lead to a mental event? That is a complete mystery. No one has a clue to that. If you can solve that problem, believe me, you'd win the Nobel Prize. But anyway, here's how Locke analyzes what happens. For Locke, an apple is a collection of ideas. So any object of perception for Locke is a collection of simple ideas, okay? Now, first of all, let me explain what a simple idea is. It's a collection of simple ideas. When you collect a bunch of simple ideas, when you collect a bunch of simple ideas, you get a complex idea, okay? When you look at an apple, you see red, for example. Let's say it's a red apple. Okay, redness is a simple idea. You can't break that up into anything else. Redness, okay? You also see a shape, let's say round. Round is a simple idea. Let's say you touch the apple, you feel something, the texture of it, that's a simple idea. Let's say you weigh it. The weight will be a simple idea. So the simple ideas are things that you cannot break up. No, sorry about forget the weight part. Okay, that's okay. You keep the weight in there. Keep the weight in there. So the weight, the shape, the size, the color, the taste. These are all simple ideas. Simple ideas. Then, when you look at an apple, here's what Locke says. When you look at an apple, you're going to see all these simple ideas. You're going to see the shape, the color. You could taste it. You could weigh it. Okay, all these are simple ideas. Now, you say to yourself, these simple ideas can't be floating in space. First of all, they're all connected. They're all connected to something. First of all, it's an apple, and it has all these properties. It's red, as it has a certain taste, has a certain shape. So all these ideas are combined. There's a combination of ideas. That combination of ideas, they all fit together. That leads to the complex idea of apple. So when we see all these ideas brought together, we call it an apple. If you see a certain collection of ideas, a certain shape, a certain color, you'll call it a banana. You see a certain collection of ideas, you'll call it a car. You call it a table, depending upon what the collection of ideas are. So that's the first thing Locke does. He distinguishes between simple ideas, like color and taste, size and shape, and then he distinguishes between simple ideas and complex ideas. And complex ideas are simply a collection of simple ideas. Okay, that's pretty simple. He also distinguishes between different types of simple ideas. He distinguishes, for example, between things like color and taste. Let's see, color, taste, sound, what something sounds like. These are all simple ideas, and he distinguishes these he's going to call these secondary qualities. I'll tell you what that means in a second. These are secondary qualities. And he distinguishes between these secondary qualities and primary qualities. I'll tell you what those are. So primary qualities would be things like the shape, the weight, whether it's moving or it's the motion, whether it's moving or at rest, and so on. But mainly the shape, the weight. These are two major primary qualities, basically these are qualities that the sciences study, the mechanical properties that can be quantified. So you look at an apple, for example. Let's say it's red. Red is a secondary quality. What that means is that the apple is really not apple. A secondary quality is not in the object; it's in our mind. The redness, Locke would say, is the apple is not red. The redness comes from our perceptual system. Our mind leads it, creates the redness. The redness is not in the apple. The taste is not in the apple, and so on. These are secondary qualities. This distinction goes back to Galileo and also to Descartes. I don't think they use the same terminology. They didn't say secondary, primary, but the distinction is there. Okay, so the primary qualities, though, like the shape, the weight, whether it's moving or at rest, the location and things like this, these are actually in the object itself. So the apple actually does have that shape, whatever shape it has. It has whatever it weighs, it actually does have that weight. Whatever the volume is, it actually does have that volume. So this distinction between secondary qualities and primary qualities is very, very fundamental. And it's also counterintuitive. Many people find it, most children, I think, would find it very difficult to even comprehend. I mean, most children, and probably even most adults, if you show them a red apple and you say, describe the apple to me, they will say, and you say, really, describe the apple. And what they will say is, it's red. And Descartes would say, right off the bat, you're already mistaken. The apple is not red. The apple has no taste. All that is produced in our mind. What the apple does, it does have the shape and it does have the weight. Okay, these are what science studies. Redness actually does have the wavelength associated with it. That's a primary quality, but it doesn't. The redness, the actual perception of red, is not in the apple. Okay, now this is what Locke says. So, if you ask Locke, well, what is an apple? What would Locke say? Locke would say, we have this idea of an apple as a collection of these simple ideas, but we don't believe that these ideas are just floating in empty space. Something has to be red. Something has to be sweet. Something has to have that shape. That's what Locke calls the substance. The apple is a substance. And this goes back to Descartes. Descartes and also Aristotle, they both agreed. And there's a substance there. The question now is, what is a substance? Descartes had an answer. A substance is the substance of the apple is it's extended in space. If you ask Locke what is a substance, Locke's answer to this is very interesting. It'd be very surprised because Locke is an empiricist and he really goes back to common sense. But his answers are far from common sense. If you ask Locke what an apple is or what a table is, what any substance is, Locke's answer would be this. It's something I know not what. If you showed Locke this marker and said, Locke, what is this marker? You know what his answer would be? It's something I know not what. If you show him a table, it's something I know not what. Why does he say that? The reason is because the color, all these qualities of the secondary qualities, the primary qualities of the apple, they have to be the qualities of something. Something has to be red. Something has to have a particular shape. Something has to have a particular taste. That's the something is the substance. Okay. Now you could say, well, what's the problem? I see the substance, so it's right in front of me. First of all, Locke agrees with Descartes, that you actually do not see the substance. Okay, you see a representation of it. But anyway, what is a something? That has the something, the substance that is red, that has a certain shape, that has a certain taste. Locke's answer to that is, I don't know, because I never see the substance. I do see the redness, I see the shape, I can taste it, I can weigh it, but I never see the something that underlies all these qualities. For Locke, the substance, it lies underneath. The substance is that which underlies all these properties. And since we never see them and don't have any representation of them at all, we have no idea what substance is. So that's fundamental to Locke. If you ask Locke, what is a substance? His answer is, it's something I know not what.